Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I want to discuss the Joker movie. Obviously, I'm going to get into spoilers later, but before I really get into that, in case you're coming across this video and you haven't seen Joker yet, giving you my non-spoiler, kind of review, I guess, would be, it is well worth your time. I personally thought it was a great movie, but at the end of the day, everyone's going to have different opinions. Obviously, going into this, there's the whole thing about, like, it being, disturbing, graphic, which the graphic and disturbing aspects, I guess it doesn't hit me the same way, because I'm like, because there were moments in the movie I'm like, because there were levels of violence I was like, I didn't quite expect that, but maybe it's also because I am coming from that perspective of, because you are kind of thinking it is a comic book movie, that it wouldn't do that, just because most comic book movies, obviously Deadpool is kind of its own exception, but like, most comic book movies tend to be PG-13, so when they kind of go, whoa, but to be fair, and that's a whole conversation in itself, is the fact is it diverts. I think you have your expectations because it is a bit of a comic book movie, but which isn't to say anything, because plenty of comic books have been graphic. DC comics have been graphics. Marvel comics have been graphics. Comic books in general, so it's not that crazy. But I think the reason why it didn't hit me the same way, just because like I've watched plenty enough graphic stuff where it'd be like, I've watched plenty of crime dramas that can be brutal. It's even interesting because like on the DC front, like I've watched Preacher, I've seen Pennyworth, like there's some pretty graphic stuff that goes down in Pennyworth, which kind of took me by surprise. So I think that's why it doesn't hit me, but I could see where someone could look at it and be like, I don't know if necessarily the violence is what people would refer to as disturbing, but just a lot of nature of the movie could be considered disturbing. So I mean, I think I've never really heard like what people meant when they specifically said disturbing, because obviously no one wants to get into spoilers yet. So, but nevertheless, I think even with all of that, and the fact is, going into this, obviously Todd Phillips had made it known, like, hey, this movie is not pulling from the comic books. It's just his own version of, an origin story for the Joker. And I think it's an excellent origin story, because me personally, I kind of felt like the movie was a little slow at the beginning, not in a bad way. It's just, I think it's because I don't watch a lot of movies, and so a lot of movies I typically watch aren't really slow. So it's probably been a long time since I've seen like a kind of, and it's not even really like a slow movie. It's like you need all that setup, because it's all meant to introduce you to this character, see what he's going through and how he spirals and becomes the Joker. So it's all necessary. So it's not like it's unnecessary, but to me it felt a little slow. But it has moments where just like certain things would happen and it'd be like, whoa, it just kind of it just seems like things were kind of going, and then bam, hit you, and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting things to kind of like go from 0 to 60 that quickly in certain regards, but that's just me. So, but I think, especially if you do like DC, like if you want to see like the Joker's origin story, I think, especially if you're a DC fan, I think you will really like this movie. And even if you aren't, I think this is a compelling enough story that, because you don't need to know Joker, you don't need to know DC Comics to enjoy this movie, legitimately, because, because the argument could be made is like, if you took away Joker and just made this something else, and made it not about the DC character, like, this story still, I think, would be interesting too, but because you obviously have such an iconic character behind it, and it lends itself very nicely to the story being told, and just how everything kind of folds together. So regardless, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I don't, at the end of the day, that's my opinion. Maybe you won't agree, and that's totally fine. So that's where I stand. Obviously, like I said, this is me saying non-spoiler stuff. Going forward, I will be going into spoilers. So if you have not seen Joker, do not continue watching this video, because I will spoil stuff for you. So let's get into the spoilers of the whole thing. I really like the fact that, like I said, this story is kind of interesting, kind of how it is told, in the sense that, because I'm stammering on my own words. I love the transition for Arthur. Like, obviously he's a clown, and I was actually kind of surprised we kind of start off with it immediately. It's like, because I think it's neat that it's not like we go all the way through his life or anything like that. We're like, we focus on this particular point in his life to like almost like it's like the moments leading up to him becoming the Joker. He's already been seeing a social worker for a while. Like, it's not like, oh, because I think in my brain I was thinking like it just kind of came up and maybe he just started seeing a social worker or something. It's like, no, it's been consistent in his life. We don't know necessarily for how long, and and it's that thing of like, the movie isn't trying to make you go like, oh, isn't he? It's a I think the movie does this interesting thing, and this is my takeaway from it. Maybe someone else will take something else away from it, but I think it's interesting how the movie does make Arthur to a certain extent sympathetic. not that the fact is it does not justify all that he's done, but I think it's actually pretty smart how they tell the story of how like he is this person who is dealing with a lot of stuff. He's on medication. He and it's something I talked about with the trailers. Like he feels kind of invisible, like no one ever sees him, and you know he kind of got the rough end of that, because it's like even the people who claim to see him, you know, what they do, Randall, it's like, oh, here, I give you this gun so you can take care of yourself. And she's like, hey, you have a friend, he's looking out for you and everything. But then it's like, no, because later on when it comes to the circumstances, which even I was kind of shocked when he was at that kid's party at that hospital, and it's like, he drops the gun, I was like, oh, wow. And he tried to cover it up by being like it was a prop and everything. And Randall kind of threw him under the bus. It's like, oh yeah, he says you owe him money for the fact that you're trying to get money off of him. I guess like Randall made it seem like Arthur bought it off of him, which is like, and even Arthur's like, wait, he said that? Because it hurt him, because like I thought we were friends. You told me that because you were looking out for me. But Randall, I guess Randall did it because it's like, oh, like because the question is gonna be like, okay, where did this gun come from? And Randall's not about to lose his job over this, so he's trying to be like, oh yeah, it's all Arthur. It was all him, you know, trying to throw him under the bus to save his own job. Maybe it's just the fact that he doesn't like Arthur, because even Arthur's boss, what's his name, Hoyt, had been like, the fact of the matter is everyone here is kind of weirded out by you. You're a bit weird. He's like, I like you. I actually don't even know why I like you. But the fact is he's not even willing to listen to Arthur, because Arthur's like, that sign, they want the sign back and everything, sure, but I can't give it to him because so-and-so. It's like, why would a whole bunch of kids steal the sign? That's complete another BS. And he's like, well, why would I keep it? He's like, I don't know. Like the fact is, and I think that in itself is an important thing. No one ever listens to him. It's kind of like his big frustration. I kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but the point I was trying to make is that it's not that you're trying to like you can sympathize without agreeing with everything that he's done. You can understand it's like he's someone that was beaten down by the world, kind of shunned, not listened to. So you can understand, you know, from a perspective, you can be like, oh, I can, you know, understand that to a certain extent. Does not in any shape or form justify all the stuff that he does later on. But nevertheless, and it was kind of interesting too, because I think it all kind of stems from like his relationship with his mom too. Like I thought his mom was gonna be like his #1 fan. It's like, no. At one point she was like, oh, you want to be a comedian? Don't you need to be funny? I was in the theater. I was thinking to myself, I was like, Jesus, that's not the most encouraging thing for a mother to say. I was like, that's actually kind of fucked up. And I think that kind of lends itself into the story later on when you actually, you know, piece everything together. But I had a feeling, because I actually heard this ahead of time. Like it had been thrown out there, the whole potentially Arthur being Thomas Wayne's son. Now, from a storytelling perspective, it's like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. It's like if they did go down that route, it would actually make Arthur and Bruce like half brothers, which would be interesting in itself. But it's like, because it really resonated with me, like the moment she started talking so positively. It's like, oh, Thomas Wayne, he's such a good man. It's even interesting the fact they said he's running for mayor. I don't know typically in the comic books if he ever did that or not, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. The fact of the matter is, it's like, I think it's actually kind of interesting what the story does. It tells a story revolving around, you know, mental illness, and how, you know, some people, you know, mental illness can be such a thing that is kind of pushed to the side. And I think that's such an interesting, because it's like Arthur was going to the social worker over and over again, but then funding got cut, and it's like what that can mean for someone. It's like, you know, people who are disturbed can't actually get the help they need, that people who are, you know, have some mental issues are kind of, because how did, you know, Thomas describe it? He was just like, oh, you know, after all the circumstances, it's like, oh, people like that who are following this clown and stuff like that, basically calling them clowns. So looking down upon those who are less fortunate, because it doesn't look good coming from someone who's wealthy and powerful to kind of look down on those who are less fortunate, who don't have as much, who are going through a lot of stuff. And it's like the city, it's a, you know, it's in an interesting way. And I think that holds true, because Gotham, I think, does a really good job of being almost anywhere, like a very like rundown city where a lot of crime goes down. Like Gotham could literally be any city, like, because I think they did a job, because obviously Gotham can have a tendency to be like very like, when you think about all the Batman supervillains and stuff around there, it's kind of like, obviously it's a very exaggerated world, but I think in this world it's like they do a good job of making it like it could be any city, like a city where just things didn't go down the right way, a lot of people in impoverished situations, that, you know, mental health not really being, you know, looked after. Me personally, it's like, it does get you thinking about real world issues, and I think that's something it's very interesting about this movie, that it does tell a compelling story that, you know, as a comic, you know, fan of superheroes and stuff like that and villains, you can enjoy it while also taking some applications from it and thinking about, you know, what, you know, the parallels to real life. You know, I think a movie that can make you kind of think about that, it can just not just be entertainment, but there could be, you know, some thought-provoking, and a lot of people said it, there's a lot of interesting conversations that can be had because of this movie. I mean, like I was saying before, kind of like the difference between those at, you know, like I said, from impoverished backgrounds to those who are in power. Because obviously, like, they focus on, like, the Wayne family. I mean, it makes sense because the Wayne family is the most wealthy family in Gotham. It's just, the Wayne name holds so much weight. So, you know, it shows you that kind of disparage between those who have not and those who have, you know, and I just thought that was kind of it, you know, I think that kind of feeds into, you know, what I was talking about. And I kind of talked around it and hadn't really talked about it exactly, but that whole train scene was so fascinating to me because that's one of those moments that escalated and I wasn't expecting it. Like, he was getting beat up, but obviously, like, earlier we saw him get beat up, he needed to fight back, but this is an opportunity where I think you could make the argument maybe he felt like, no, I can protect myself this time. I have this weapon. I can do this. I mean, and I think this is where it starts spiraling for Arthur, where it's like, I have nothing to, like, I lost my job, so what am I being so worried about? And the fact is, these people are hurting me, and, you know, so, and I think this is where you kind of go, okay, you're defending yourself up to a certain point, and then it just becomes straight up murder because he goes after that guy when he's running away. That speaks volumes. He turned into a hunter, I think, because he's someone that was kind of preyed upon so much in his own life that he wanted to get someone back. And I think this speaks volumes in itself, is the fact is that after he did all that, he has his moment in the bathroom, he's dancing, like, it's almost like he was scared at first, but then he kind of felt freeing about it. And then immediately after, what does he do? He later on goes and meets up with Sophie and starts kissing her, and it's like, so it made him feel powerful when he normally feels powerless. And I think that was really where it really starts to, like, because obviously there's definitely things there. I even thought it was kind of interesting how they made it so that basically his laughing is kind of like a neurological condition of his. And they kind of play into that, you know, it's just because there's a moment where he does his laugh and then he stops. I was wondering, because I kept thinking that, oh, like when you see it in the trailers, I thought, oh, that was him, you know, practicing his clown laugh and then, you know, stopping because it's like, ha 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 ha, okay, let me try it again, ha ha. That's what I thought, but it's like, no, there's actually, it's, you know, potentially a condition and stuff like that. But that was the beginning of seeing Arthur shift, because when you see him go forward in the movie, like, there's a little more confidence. Like, even him talking to his social worker, he's like, you don't listen to me. Like, I've been here over and over again and you never listen to me. And she tries to say, like, hey, they don't care about people like you, Arthur. They don't care about people like me. And I think you can make the argument hurt, like, because this is like your final session, your final time meeting and stuff like that. And even that conversation, he's like, so how do I get my meds? And she's like, I'm sorry. It almost seemed like she didn't give him a proper answer. He talks about it later on in the movie that he stopped taking his meds, but it's like, did he stop taking his meds because he couldn't get access to them, or did he just straight up not stop taking them? I just, you know, that's something I wasn't sure about, which that's a whole conversation in itself. Because what I also thought was kind of interesting was the fact is that there is Batman related stuff. Obviously this is Gotham, this is that world, but they don't make a big point of it necessarily. Like, it's there as part of the story, but it's not the main focus. It's not like this is a Batman movie, because it is a Joker movie with, you know, drizzle of Batman mixed in, you know, with like the whole him going to see Bruce thing because he learned from his mom, like, wait, Thomas Wayne might be my father and everything. He's reading the letters and everything, and he even gets super pissed because I think it's the whole thing of like, wait, you've been hiding this from me. When my dad's alive, I get to, you know, potentially know him and everything. And he actually goes and talks to Bruce. I'm assuming the guy that was there, because he has an accent, I'm like, is that Alfred? I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I wonder, like, that reaction he has, like, when he's meeting Bruce, is that just purely from the perspective of like, hey, you're my half little brother, this is interesting? Or is it just the aspect of looking at him and thinking about the fact is of like, yeah, I want to, is there some part of his brain that's potentially resenting Bruce because it's like, you had this great life? But he even said it himself later on that he didn't want anything from Thomas. He just wanted, you know, some, you know, some affection, some kind of, you know, warmth, you know, from him, you know, what it says later on. So his mom ends up in the hospital later on, you know, Sophie is there for him, and there's just so many interesting things that, for one, the reveal, I thought it was so beautifully done, the reveal of like his and Sophie, like he goes into Sophie's place. I'm like, oh man, that's so interesting. I'm like, man, she must be gonna be shocked when you just roll up in her place. I'm sure, like, no matter if you're dating, she's still not gonna be too happy about that. But then she's like, wait, your name's Arthur, right? The moment she said that, I'm like, oh, it was all in his head. I was like, are you telling me it was all in it? Yep. Their entire, like, every moment they had, like, because the moment she did that whole thing of kind of joking with, and in that moment, like, he created this delusion of like they were a thing, because it almost did seem like that relationship came out of nowhere, because it almost seems like they don't really have any history, because it was just kind of like almost like a passing hey, and then it's like, oh, you know, because it's like, oh, you were following me and everything, right? And she was so okay with it too. That's why I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, oh, she's like, I was hoping you'd come into the bank and, you know, potentially rob it and everything. I was like, huh. It all seemed interesting. Like, it did seem like it kind of happened fast, but I thought maybe it's because she didn't like him. But it's like, nope, it was all in his head. We never actually got to see if he actually did anything to. I wonder, did he come to the realize? I think it's because he came to the realization that was all in my head. So he just left, and that's got to be destructive. I mean, not that we know of. I don't think anything happened to her, but still, that's a lot. I mean, because all this spiraled from the fact is of like Murray, played by Robert De Niro. You know, and I think they did a good job of even showing you at the beginning, just, you know, not necessarily I mean, it's so interesting how it all pieces together, because obviously, like, he was thinking about, like, oh, like, he's going to show up at the show, and he's in the crowd and everything, and Murray brings him up there, and it's like, oh, I wish I had a son like you, because it's him, you know, because he missed, I think, you know, not having a father figure in his life. He was kind of wanting that from Thomas later on, when he finds out, oh, Thomas might be my dad. And he kind of, you know, because he looks up to Murray, he's like, I watch your show every night. Obviously, it's something he bonds over with his mom, too. But then, you know, Murray making fun of him when he's trying to do comedy. Because the thing is, like, we see that, like, Sophie is laughing, too, at the club. And it seems like other people are laughing, too. But now the thing is, like, now you think, like, well, was that all in his head? Because even from what they showed, it didn't seem like anyone was laughing. So that might have all been in his head, too. And I think that's the thing about this, is that borderlining, like, you know, maybe that's the difference. Like, he can't tell what's real and what's not anymore, maybe. And then also learning about his mom, because it's like, oh, she was in Arkham State, which is, I don't know, because doesn't that eventually become Arkham Asylum? Or is Arkham State Hospital something else entirely? I kind of get the feeling like it becomes Arkham Asylum later on down the road, but obviously, like, I don't think those are two separate places. I think they're one place where it's like, that gets taken down and gets rebranded as Arkham Asylum. Regardless, it's a whole tangent in itself, but learning that, because he learns from Thomas, it's like, wait, my mom adopted me? He's like, wait, what? It's like, I'm not your dad. Your mom's not even your mom. She adopted you. And he's like, no, why are you telling these lies? He gets the files and everything and looks into it, and it turns out like his mom suffers from delusions and everything. So, which, once again, the connection there, like Arthur created one with Sophie, much like his mom created one with her and Thomas. Because I was thinking that was so interesting, because it's like, oh, Thomas Wayne having the Joker for a bastard son, and even Bruce having the Joker be his brother. Like, I thought that was kind of interesting, but it's like, no, it's delusions that was created from someone who was going through something. And, you know, and the sad thing is, on top of that, there's an extra layer of, like, there was abuse, like, both to Arthur and his mom, because her boyfriend at the time beat him to the point, like, Arthur was, like, chained up to, like, was it like a heat radiator or something like that? He was covered in bruises and stuff, like, suffered some head trauma. So it's like, that probably lends itself of, like, because I was about to say, like, it wouldn't make sense for him to kind of suffer some issues similar to hers, considering the fact is he's not her biological child. But in the grand scheme of things, when you think about what he's been through, the trauma it could have done to his head, that's a whole conversation in itself. That abuse, that trauma could have triggered something, you know, like, it, you know, mentally made him unstable just dealing with all that, to the point he doesn't remember it. But maybe it's because the trauma was blocked out, but, you know, maybe there's some little bit of darkness in him from all of that, you know, he went through, and just that in itself starts sending him spiraling more and more, to the point, you know, being invited onto the Murray show and everything, and he's telling the knock joke, and he's, you know, mocking like he's gonna, you know, shoot himself the moment he tells the joke on TV and everything. And even the moment, and I thought was kind of interesting, like how they had him play it out, of him trying to be like, hey there, Mary, no, that's not right, get it right, you know, like this almost perfectionist angle of his, of like, this is your one moment, you gotta make it count, you gotta make it shine. Because, and it's something I talked about with the trailers, I thought was kind of interesting, because obviously a lot of people are rallying behind this clown situation, and I thought that was so interesting how they labeled it, because some people are like, oh, he's a clown vigilante, and Sophie, who wasn't real but was in his head, was like, yeah, there's 3 less basically douchebags left, there's millions of them left. That was almost like, I think, his brain justifying being like, yeah, you're doing the right thing, Arthur, this world is corrupt and it needs you to kind of bring something to it. Because like I said, the way Thomas referred to like those who potentially, you know, people in the town, those who are less fortunate, are kind of looking like, wait, you're referring to all of us as clowns? And it's like, because they look at this killer clown, this clown vigilante, as someone, because it turns out, because I was wondering, like, they made such a point about these 3 particular victims that he killed on a train because they were Wayne Enterprise employees, and at the same time it's like, and it's something that gets brought up later on, would it have been as much of an impact if they weren't Wayne Enterprise employees, if he hadn't gone up there and being like, I didn't really know these people, but they worked for me, and once you're part of the family, you're always part of the family, which, you know, to Arthur later on kind of sounds like BS, because I'm part of the family, my mom's part of the family, you ignored us, and that's a whole, like I said, that's a whole thing in itself, as I was talking about earlier. But you see him kind of getting excited because all these people are rallying behind him. They don't know it's him, but they're rallying behind him like, yeah. I even thought it was kind of an interesting line, and you can kind of think about it just in the grand scheme of just the Batman lore of like, oh yeah, like someone who's hiding behind a mask, who's a coward, who can't show themselves for who they really are, which is interesting considering the fact is obviously in the grand scheme of things, your son eventually becomes the Cape Crusader who wears a mask and kind of, you know, deals out vigilante justice. So I think there's a little bit of an irony in that regard. And then also the Randall scene, like, because it almost came at, you saw it coming, but at the same time it was almost unsuspecting, and I wasn't expecting it to be as brutal as it was, but it was brutal. The neck, the eye, and then smashing his head, and the dude, what was his name, Gary, having to watch and everything, and then just Arthur sitting there covered in blood like it's nothing. And, you know, you have Gary in the corner just like so scared and terrified. He's like, no, you get to go, Gary. And even this almost like psychotic moment of him, like Gary trying to get by, he jumps at him and it's scaring him. And it's like, oh, he has to open the door for Gary and everything. It's like, you've always been nice to me, Gary, so you get to go. Then he gets all dressed up in, you know, his clown makeup and everything, because the cops are onto him because they're like, oh, you're kind of a bit of a suspect because you recently got fired. There's a whole situation with you having a gun at a hospital when you were supposed to be working and everything. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and his moment of just kind of dancing and kind of living it up. The fact of the matter is, you know, the cops are after him, and, you know, he hides himself amongst the crowd of people on the train, blending in, and just kind of just showing you like the madness that it has transpired, you know, in Gotham. The fact of the matter is, you know, so many people are riled up just because it's like they feel unheard and they want this to be their chance to be heard, to be seen. And, you know, which is so interesting, like maybe I'm overthinking it, but just kind of like, oh, Arthur disappearing into a crowd, you know, someone who wanted to be seen so much in that moment disappearing. I don't know why. To me, I think I've been looking too much into it, but I just thought that was kind of interesting, him going on the show and everything. And you could tell, like, you know, when he was there and everything, and he's like, you know, call me Joker. And it's like, why is that? Why don't you use your real name? It's like, because that's what you refer to me as, Murray. And Murray's like, really? I called you that? And Mark Maron's character is like, I don't know. Which I think that probably irritated him even more, because it's like, you said all these things about me, but you don't even remember, you know? And it's so interesting because he even says it later on, I didn't dress up like a clown because I'm trying to be a symbol or something. He's like, I'm not trying to be political. But it makes you wonder, is there some part of him that did believe what he says later on about, like, the fact is, like I had brought up earlier, if these guys were like, you know, it's like, if it was like Thomas Wayne could never understand what it's like to be a guy like me. The fact is, people argue and fight every day, not willing to see the other person's perspective, which once again, you can make huge parallels to real life in that regard. But what I'm wondering is, like I said, was that how he really felt? Or was he just using that as a justification? Because it's like, oh, you think it's funny to kill people like you did? And he's like, yeah, I do think it's funny, even telling these dark, twisted jokes. Because for him, it's like, because he even brought this up to his mom, which I didn't even talk about that. He killed his mom because it was just kind of like realizing you literally lied to me my entire life. All I've ever done is be a good son and looked after you. And what did it was all a lie. I think that was almost, you could almost make it seem like this lie that was his life. This, you know, because he says a line of, I always thought my life was a tragedy, but it's a fucking comedy. Because it's like, in the grand scheme of things, in a fucked up way, like, you know, because he's so mentally disturbed, he, you know, it's like, look at all these things in my life. It turns out, you know, that there's so much craziness that is his life. And I think that could be seen as him, like I said, snuffing out that fake life. Because he even said, like, you talked about my laugh being some neurological thing, but he's like, honestly, I think it's the real me, you know? So that's what I think he found in all this. I think he thinks, oh, I found my real self. This is who I am. In all honesty, I wasn't sure how that whole Murray situation was going to play out. But for him, he's telling a joke and everything. And then pulls a gun out on Murray and shoots him. And it very much reminds me of Gotham, the TV show. Obviously, they're different spectrums, but their Joker character, that being Jerome, had a very similar thing like that at Gotham GCPD, where he was on camera announcing it to the world. And that's kind of crazy to think about. This went to every home, you know, Gotham. And so he gets arrested at the end. I'm like, is this really going to end with you getting arrested? But even then, you know, the town is in chaos. And it's like, do you realize what happened? This world is going in, this city's going into chaos because of what you did. And Arthur's like, yeah, I know. Isn't it beautiful? Because for him, it's, you know, and that's always the thing about the Joker's character, you know, that's always been the famous line, you know, from taking images from The Dark Knight. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Because for him, he had said, I have nothing to be afraid of anymore because nothing matters anymore. Because his entire life got turned upside down. He himself had been turned upside down by these many... To me, I look at Arthur's situation as being a perfect storm of just terrible shit. It's just the system that he's a part of, you know, from the mental health perspective, as well as like the social status perspective, plus just complications in his own family, just like so much layered upon itself led to this situation. It's not a clear cut of like, oh, it's just one thing being an issue, and that once again parallels to real life. Like, there are complications. Nothing is ever just one particular thing. There have to be accounts of everything. Like, it takes multiple things coming together for something like that to transpire. You know, it's not just as simple as it's this and it's that, you know, which I'm not trying to get political, but, you know, and I think that's something, a message that the movie is trying to make, even though it's taking place in this world where things aren't even, you can't even say like it's 100% exaggerated, that, you know, like it's that kind of scary thing of like, you can see real life in it, you know, but you can still have that, you know, distance of being like, it's a movie, it's not real, it's taking, you know, this well-known villain and putting them almost basically in a real-world situation, which is interesting. But I thought it was kind of a powerful moment of like when the clowns crash into the police car that have Arthur in it. I don't think they knew it had Arthur in it until they saw him. And someone's like, whoa, that's Joker. And they pull him out and they put him on the hood. They rest him down gently, because it's like, and once again, this is something because of the TV show Gotham, I kind of made the parallels of like, he resonated with so many people, like people who felt downtrodden, who felt, you know, ignored, who felt less than. He tapped into that darkness in some of those people, and he brought it to the light, you know, to basically consume and snuff out that very light. To an extent. And it's just like the way they look at him, almost like in a twisted way, like almost like a messiah. It's like, you gave us the platform, the message, the opportunity to kind of be ourselves, you know. And then like how it plays into the whole situation, because I start looking at the background, I'm like, isn't this supposed, like, it's like there's a theater and everything. I'm like, is this supposed to be where? And it's like, lo and behold, Thomas, Martha, and Bruce come out. And I'm like, whoa, are we about to do? And it's like, yeah, like some dude who's caught up in all of this, just and that's the thing. It's a random mask, and it could be anybody. Because obviously, I think typically it's a dude named Joe Chill. But I think the whole point is, and the reason why they never have the person take off the mask, because it isn't supposed to matter, because it's supposed to be this movement. And this is something Gotham did. I thought a potential route that Gotham kind of could have gone down that they did, but I still enjoy the route that Gotham ended up going down with the whole Joker thing. But the whole thing of like, anybody could be the Joker, and I think that's an angle that this movie kind of ends on, you know, because it's like, it doesn't matter who that particular person is. It's a whole, like I said, a series of events that led to that particular thing. There are just so many things. Once again, it's not trying to say like I said, it's not trying to put blame on one particular person, which the movie's kind of, a lot of people are putting, you know, on Thomas Wayne, of just like everything that's kind of wrong. The people in power, the rich and powerful, they're at fault. But like I said, it's a combination of so many things that led to this domino effect of events. But you know, that happens like that, and you know, and it's crazy to think about, because in this universe, it's like, Joker's the reason why your parents died. He started this quote-unquote revolution that led to your parents dying. And I think that could add this interesting element to it. Because also Bruce met with Arthur, so what the implications could potentially mean in this universe if we did go down the route of, if there was a potential sequel to this, which obviously, like, this is meant to be like a one and done. Obviously, Joaquin Phoenix isn't one of those actors who does a lot of like sequel type of movies and stuff like that. Some people have kind of said like, this is kind of set up to be a one and done because that's the type of actor he is. Plus, you kind of don't want to go down that dark space a lot of times. It's just kind of like a, whoa, you know, you spend enough dark time as a character, you kind of want to kind of cleanse your palate a little bit potentially, especially something kind of going down this dark of a route. But for him to be, you know, there and, you know, basking in this, like all these people cheering and gathering around him, taking the blood from his mouth and creating a smile from it, you know, it's just interesting what this potentially could mean for a sequel, even though there's not going to be one. But even how it ends, you know, it's like he's in that moment where he's laughing to himself, and she's like, what's so funny? He's like, I was just thinking of a joke. She's like, do you want to tell me? He's like, you wouldn't get it. And I love how they stylized that by like having him say that, and it cuts back to Bruce in that alleyway with his parents, and it's like, I like how you did that. That was a night, I don't know, like I really got a kick out of it, because it's like, the joke is what he did, he basically created potentially his own arch nemesis, you know, that he, in his chaos, he created something else in that moment, like with all that he was doing, the ramifications, the domino effects of like not knowing what this means. I mean, maybe he was also laughing because he knew that Thomas Wayne and Martha were dead, and it's like, I'm kind of all alone in this world, and now so are you, Bruce. And maybe that creates this kind of weird, twisted kinship between them, which could potentially lead to like understanding, like in this particular universe, like let's dive into this universe. It doesn't have to necessarily, because obviously it's not going to connect to the DCEU. For now, who knows, maybe they'll twist things around to kind of make it more in line with the DCEU, regardless of the situation. You know, this could be like, it's like, oh, this is an alternate, you know, world. This is kind of an Elseworld situation. Is what some people kind of have referred to it as, but it could be either way. It's kind of interesting to think of, like I said, the ties that the Joker and Bruce potentially could have in this continuity. It's kind of similar, without going to spoilers, Krypton did a very interesting thing with Superman's grandfather Seg and Zod. There's a connection there, and obviously if you haven't seen Krypton, I won't spoil that for you, but like a similar like thing of like taking this mythology you might know decently well and kind of twisting it a little bit in, you know, in a very unique way. And I think that's kind of interesting. So that could be another meaning behind, like I said, of him saying like, you wouldn't get the joke, because I'm the only one that's going to find it funny. But he left out of that room, you see like bloody footsteps, so it's like maybe he had killed her, and we see him kind of running from like the guards trying to subdue him, and that's how you end the movie. And what I thought was kind of interesting, someone had said, you know, in a non-spoiler review, was like, this movie doesn't resolve anything. Like, the way Gotham is, and, you know, you can also make the argument that is what Gotham is. Like, that, you know, even with Batman, it's not a permanent situation. It's actually a Band-Aid on a much, I mean, and that's the thing, like, there was no resolution about the issues that were brought up in this movie. And I thought that was kind of a fascinating thing of like, oh, there's no big fix. It's like, no, the world, Gotham has been thrown into chaos. It was literally already on the cusp. It was already there. It just took someone lighting the fuse, and that's what Arthur did. It's interesting too, when you think about it, because typically the whole conversation is, do the freaks, the quote-unquote freaks, bring Batman to Gotham, or did Batman's appearance in Gotham bring out the freaks? You know, and referring to freaks like all his supervillains, whether it be Joker, whether it be, you know, well, his go-to like rogues gallery of villains. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg type of thing, and they kind of changed it to make it like Joker was here first, and in turn he actually gave birth to Batman. But who's to say that Batman eventually won't give birth to all these other supervillains, whether it be your own, whether it be your Two-Faces, your Penguins, your Catwoman, your Poison Ivy, your Mr. Freeze. Obviously they have Mr. Freeze is kind of a different circumstance, but you get what I'm trying to say. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. So like anyone, I would love to see this have a sequel. I would love this continuity to kind of get folded into the DCEU, but obviously the whole thing is, I'm like, obviously it is its own thing and it's meant to be, and I think it does a very nice job of doing that. It has a beginning, middle, and end. There's so many implications of what can be beyond, but the story has been told. It's potentially your own imagination to take the story where you could go. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll ever do that, but you in your own mind, you know, can think about it and stuff like that. So obviously this is just some of my thoughts about the movie. I'd really love to get to know your perspective. I've yet to listen to any reviews, because obviously I want to see the movie for myself. And obviously I heard some people just kind of discuss it. Something I've never really talked about, because I'm not really that type of person who pays too much attention to music, but it was kind of neat how they did apply the score, especially that scene with Sophie, like the way the score kind of kicks up and it just kind of dies down, and I was like, oh, because I was like, oh shit, like he's about to head to a place, like something's about to go down. I was like, I didn't know what to expect. The music kind of dies down. And so it doesn't, like, the music does kind of play into the story. It's something I feel like I should, like, if I ever did watch this movie again, I should pay more attention to. Because it's one of those things I think I take for granted, like, what gravitas, like, music can add to a scene, you know? Because I've just never been one of those dudes who paid too much attention to it. This is one of those movies where I still feel like I didn't pay as much attention as I should, but I went into it being like, I need to pay more attention to it. So I caught moments of it, but I feel like I don't really get the true appreciation for it in the grand scheme of things. Like I said, I would love to get to know your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm interested to kind of listen to some other discussions and reviews, just because I'm really curious where a lot of people stand when it comes to this movie. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good